Hi everyone. My name is Priyom. I'm the founder and CEO of Asanify, and today we are joined with Manuel for our Simplify Work podcast. Hello, welcome Manuel to the show. I would love to learn a little bit about your journey, but for the audience, a very quick introduction. It's a hardware-enabled AI company with a mission to combat climate change. And of course, Manuel will introduce about the company in a little bit more detail, but he has some amazing things that he can name drop into his CV. So there will be hardware, there will be Wharton, there will be YC, there will be Sequoia, and so on. I'd let him take the next part of the journey, but I would love to hear everything about what has made Manuel so successful. Over to you, Manuel. Anything you would like to start with?
Thank you so much. Really appreciate talking to you and really appreciate the invitation.
Sure. Manuel, maybe you can just start a little bit about your background and what led you to eventually starting PowerX. Firstly, very interesting and very powerful name. I would love to know a little bit about the history of how you thought of naming this also, but a little bit of what you would be lovely to start with.
Absolutely. I'm very happy to give an intro there. Not to name to be even more, but the name was conceived while I was working for a consulting company called McKinsey and Company. And we were in the Middle East, primarily focused on energy companies, so oil and gas, mining, and so on. Problem wanting to make their processes greener. Now, the way you may want to think about it is that you have power, for example, solar power is pretty abundant, and you convert this power to something. You may convert it to, thermal. So like you heat something up with, say, the energy, the power of the sun. So this conversion you call power 2x. You convert something into an outcome. And that's how the name PowerX came about.
Very interesting. So X is like a variable. You can convert anything to anything.
Exactly. You can convert power to hydrogen. You can convert power to other chemicals. You can convert power into heat, into movement, if you will. So it's a conversion. It's a function, if you will.
That is wonderful. So could you tell us a little bit about your journey, how you came to start PowerX?
Yeah, exactly at that at McKinsey and Company, when I was working with energy companies in the Middle East and honestly around the globe, from Papua New Guinea to Chile. We had a client that put a lot of money on the line, several $100 million to make the process greener. And we were struggling to find good solutions for these customers. And that really shook me, because here I am having one of the best teams and minds in the industry, working for a very powerful company, really. And we are struggling with finding good solutions. One part of that was the idea that what you can measure, you can manage. And we already had this challenge to actually measure what was going on. There were drill holes all over. There were camps, and energy was spent on thousands and thousands of equipment. So from that, the idea of PowerX was born. What you can measure, you can manage. And I left McKinsey, really enjoyed working there. A fantastic experience, but I left McKinsey and founded PowerX with this idea in mind, and then started to build the first hardware. In fact, the first hardware was built both in Germany, where I'm from originally, but also in New York and San Francisco, while we went through YC, Y Combinator.
Oh, okay. So when you left McKinsey, did you already get any funding, or you left, without any specific plans, and then you started out?
I left without any specific plans, but I got funding very soon after. Like we talk in a matter of weeks and max months. I have to admit, I was very unknowledgeable about the entire venture capital market, about overall how accessing financial markets works at all. So I went just a bit, a bit blue-eyed, but but it worked out quite well. I'm very happy about that.
Sure, sure. So, did you have any co-founders, or you started on your own?
I did have a co-founder,
Okay.
unfortunately, pretty much after like days, weeks after we
Mm-hmm.
co-founded, he
Mm-hmm.
had a family incident, so
Oh,
he had to jump off and work for a bit more stable
uh-huh.
setup than
Okay.
a well PowerX Lite entrepreneurship. We're
Okay.
still very close friends, and actually, in a couple of days,
Mm-hmm.
he'll come for a visit here to Washington D.C. from Germany, which is great.
Okay. So it's you are the only founder or person in the founding team right now in PowerX?
That's correct. I would say
Understood.
it's a fair assumption to say that I'm a single
Okay. And
founder.
okay. And how many total people do you have in terms of your current employee strength?
Yeah, including our contractors and so on. We have several dozen people.
Okay, understood. So, when you started, then how did you go about finding your initial customers? Because initially, I'm guessing it was just an idea. So, how did
Yeah,
you think about how to market this when you hardly had any people? You didn't have a co-founder, you didn't have too many people. I'm
yeah,
assuming when you started.
yeah. We went after the D2C market first, direct to consumer, and
Mm-hmm.
that brought us in honestly a couple of thousand customers. But we soon realized that it's
Mm-hmm.
really difficult because D2C setups are very diverse.
Mm-hmm.
We had to manage a number of different setups
Mm-hmm.
at each individual house, and the impact was it was there, but it was minor. So you can
Mm-hmm.
save, 5, 6, 7% maybe. Um,
Okay.
so it was a super important learning experience.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was definitely hard to keep up with the hardware and the demands of so many different diverse customers. We
Uh-huh.
then we also sold the same product, pretty much the same product to
Mm-hmm.
businesses, primarily restaurants, hotels, and so on. And we realized that we really have an inroad there. We really
Okay.
have quite some demand, and we can actually really help these companies a lot.
Hmm.
So after a couple of months, we decided to fully focus on restaurants and hotels.
Ah, interesting. And like, what is the pitch initially? If you don't have a past history, what is the initial pitch? How do you think of getting to the or getting them to trust in PowerX?
That is a really good question. It's about go to market. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I I think two things really. Number one, be open and honest where you stand.
Mm-hmm.
When we go to restaurants, when we go to even large customers that are, have a presence with tens of thousands of restaurants all over the world,
Right.
we are pretty honest and hey, we are a startup, and this is what we can deliver. But there's also things where we are still building out.
Mm-hmm.
It is easy in the US, honestly. The US is very much a startup culture. Like people try to help you, they want us to be
Oh,
successful. They
okay.
also know that a lot of innovation actually comes out of startups, and that startups
Mm-hmm.
tend to be way faster to deliver than many others.
Mm-hmm.
So we have seen that to be and play quite in our favor, where
Mm-hmm.
startups have very large companies known in India and the US
Mm-hmm.
and Europe and China and Russia,
Right.
like very large companies have said,
Mm-hmm.
we don't want to go the bureaucratic route. We actually
Mm-hmm.
want the fast and easy and lean processes and decision making
Mm-hmm.
of a startup.
Got
The
it.
second point to make here in terms of getting trust is actually around, especially if it's like found about around the team you have.
Mm-hmm.
And the people in your team. Right now, I have an insanely talented, insanely high performing team.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Not only in terms of name dropping, but also in terms of their past work experience. And
Mm-hmm.
we have people that have stayed with GitHub from pretty small to pretty large,
Wow.
like now being a unicorn.
Mm-hmm.
We have people that went with HelloFresh
Mm-hmm.
being one of the very, very early employees here in the US. So
Mm-hmm.
these people know what it means to build from the ground up. They
Mm-hmm.
also know what it means to be in very large companies and like, what does professional look like? And I
Mm-hmm.
think right now, like our entire team just
Mm-hmm.
has this professionalism baked in. And those things taken together. So be honest what you can do and cannot do. Like startup plays against you, but it also can be a strength
Mm.
because you're lean, because you're fast, and because you can adjust and don't have to be bureaucracy. And the
Got it.
second, just a very strong team. And when people look you up and they see how you
Mm-hmm.
actually move and the
Mm-hmm.
experience you have in the team, they say, it's higher risk, but I believe in that team.
Got it. So, and that brings me to my question: that how do you then hire some of this amazing talent, especially when you're early? So which came first? So, did you hire a few people before Y Combinator, or did that happen after?
Oh, YC came first. And
Understood.
YC is a good name, but it's not like the thing that makes or breaks you. Like
Sure.
many successful companies do not go to
Of
YC.
course.
Many companies that go to YC actually fail. So YC is kind of, another badge you can put on your resume or on your company's
Got it.
quote unquote CV, but it really is not the major decision point on whether
Hmm.
or not you will be successful. How to be hired?
Got it.
That's a great
Yep.
question. Much through our networks. I believe that the network is actually one of the best ways to get exceptional talent.
Mm-hmm.
People that have worked with others, like many of the people we got actually were recommended to us through our networks, and they say, there is person X. She is absolutely amazing. She's open to work. She's not on the market. Like,
Mm-hmm.
sure, you can find amazing people via LinkedIn and so on, but um, a lot of talent actually is not openly on the market. So
Mm, of
they
course.
they are introduced to you. The second
Mm-hmm.
thing is that we actually go via specific communities. So, for
Okay.
example, climate communities, energy communities, and
Mm-hmm.
then you get like talent which is not only after money or not like you have very specific talent, like people that are interested in climate
Right.
change, and
Mm.
you have people that may be the former CMO of Stripe that
Oh, wow.
are super interested in climate change and are interested in changing because of a internal ethics, moral driver and a feeling of responsibility towards our world. And so I think that's also a great second way of getting really amazing talent.
So you're saying these are the people who are inspired by your mission.
Yeah.
Understood. And so when you pitch your company to customers vis-a-vis when you pitch it to a employee, so if you have to, if they have to decide between a leaving their current job, b joining another company
Mm.
vis-a-vis PowerX, so why
Mm.
should they choose PowerX, for our audience to know if someone is interested in joining PowerX?
Yeah. I think there's four reasons to join PowerX.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Number one is in terms of salary, we pay well, not 95th percentile, so we cannot compete with Google. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's fair as a startup, but it
Mm-hmm.
covers your basic needs, or even your not so basic needs. So I think just having a fair salary. The second thing is we really are
Mm-hmm.
generous on the equity side.
Okay.
So overall, the compensation package is quite generous. So we provide a lot of upside. PowerX
Mm-hmm.
doing really well. You as a core employee, you do really well. You actually have the
Mm-hmm.
chance to become multimillionaire if that works out well.
Of course.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
that's number one and number two. So decent salary, really, really loving employees on the equity side.
Mm-hmm.
The third thing is that you actually have a mission. You do something to prevent climate change. You do something to really help with one of the biggest, in my opinion, probably the
Mm-hmm.
biggest crisis we as a human race, in fact, every living thing in the world
Mm-hmm.
has seen in thousands of years. So there is a mission perspective that's very strong that I take super seriously
Right.
because that's why I left a very cozy job myself.
Of course.
And then the final thing that attracts people to PowerX is the team. It's a bit of a chicken egg problem. What comes first? Right now, my team is hands down. It's very, very strong. And those are very smart people that really know what they're doing. I'm amazed by what this team does. So this
Wow.
combination is very strong to attract people.
Wonderful. And is it so? You primarily believe in remote working, or do you have physical offices in some places?
We have physical offices. We are headquartered in New York and have a lab and office there.
Okay.
Still, and that's one of our perks. We offer fully remote work.
Wonderful.
It is a bit more difficult in some ways, a bit easy in others. The difficult parts are like keeping up communication, internal communication. But I think we solved the problem quite well.
Is there something
like
interesting you've done?
like we have daily check-ins, we have a lot of face-to-face communication, we do offsites. So it took us some time to adjust, but now I think it's really great and fun to work like this. And well, you
Right.
have the option to work in your own place with like a river and trees outside. So that's, I really appreciate it, and I know my employees do
Sure.
too.
Sure. So I was reading some days back about one of the principles of agile, movement is that they say that in-person conversation, the impact is much more. So now, obviously, when agile was originally formed, remote working and all these advanced tools were not there. So, in terms of employee engagement, developing a culture, especially in a remote first environment, is there anything differently? Because I'm sure you've worked in office, with your past job in McKinsey, etc. So, is there something
Yeah.
specific you have done to ensure amazing culture at your company?
I fully agree. It is actually, I think it's quite challenging to build a strong culture because you do not know, for a number of reasons. Number one, you do not know what others are working on.
Mhm.
You don't have the coffee chats, like when you're
Right.
in
No
a,
small talk.
no small talk, or like, oh yeah, I just caught some glimpse of this phone call. I know they're moving this direction or they're moving on X or Y.
Right.
So there's a lot of like quote unquote chatter that you do not get, that actually keeps you informed, and you understand in which direction you use. And that's a really big thing.
Got
We are trying to solve this by every day everybody writes the 6, 7 tasks they're working on. They say
Okay.
how they feel. They write how they feel. It's like on Slack. We honestly, it's a program that asks people, "Hey, how do you feel today? What are you working on? Are there any blockers?" and so on. We
Okay.
have a super strong documentation culture that kind of comes
Ah.
from GitHub. Thanks for that.
Okay.
So like every meeting is very thoroughly documented. So you can go into the program we have, and they review the different meetings that
Okay.
took place. And then finally, honestly, I think there's benefits and there's drawbacks to remote. And we just discussed the drawbacks in terms of internal communication. You miss out on chatter. You miss out on like maybe what's happening here and there. The benefit is people have more time for deep think. Like if you sit at home and you honestly just have half an hour, if you will, to stare at the wall and think about how do I solve this problem. That can be also very rare in office environments where like you're working, somebody comes in, somebody's typing, calling loudly. A second really big benefit is that you get amazing talent, or well, like some talent, they just from COVID, they have learned to really enjoy working from home and remotely and have this flexibility, like having an hour off and then seeing your kid grow up and so on. And
Sure.
with like large companies now demanding people back, this talent is just says, sorry, but no, I I have tasted the sweetness of remote work, and so I think much of this talent is actually now available to startups like us that do offer the full remote work and have a strong performance culture around it. Could not get because a a Google or Apple with tennis courts and swimming pool and childcare in the office were just way more a way sweeter deal. So that it kind of leveled the
Right.
ground in the search for talent a bit.
Right. Right. Of course. So, I mean, wonderful point you made about the fact that in office there are a lot of distractions, and while for especially people who are extroverted, that distraction or in a way that external intervention helps them think. But for introverts who are used to thinking on their own, I
Mm,
think remote work can be extremely can be a bane, and it helps
yeah.
them think better, helps them do their work possibly better. So that's a wonderful point. And of course, as an employer, you get access to talent, and as an employee, you are also able to work while taking care of your family. That's a wonderful point that you made. And so for PowerX, I'm sure you've raised funds. You have people, dozens of people right now. What is the next big leap you want to take? Like as you said, mission is something that is amazing and extremely important. So is there something
Yeah.
immediately that you're working on that you'd love to, or you'd like to tell our audience?
We have a very convincing software right now,
Mm-hmm.
especially for restaurants.
Okay.
And we combine a number of things. We combine our energy saving element, um, and that's usually very substantial for a number of restaurants. Like they
Mm-hmm.
can save thousands of dollars with us every year. We
Oh.
combine this with our temperature uh, measurement, which really helps in terms of efficiency and compliance, like labor efficiency and compliance in the
Mm-hmm.
US.
Mm-hmm.
So, some restaurants even have to hire, let's say, a student that goes around every 2 hours to measure the temperature in the
Mm-hmm.
fridge, the freezer, and
Mm-hmm.
make sure there is no food spoilage and you're within the compliant temperature range. Like all that is automated with us, so you can actually save on labor cost. And then finally, we have control and optimization of existing
Mm-hmm.
energy equipment. So not only can we do predictive maintenance and see, how equipment is performing, but we can actually already control part of it, particularly HVAC, which means
Mm-hmm.
you automatically save on that money. We actually go so far that we want to achieve you an ROI in a payback period
Mm-hmm.
within days, if,
Mm-hmm.
for some weeks. Um, that is super important, and that's actually really,
Mm-hmm.
really, if you will, right now, a thing
Mm-hmm.
restaurants think about a lot
Okay.
because their pre-tax income, and I'm not making this up. This is statistics by
Mm-hmm.
um, an official U.S. government statistics.
Mm-hmm.
Official pre-tax income for restaurants went down 75%. From
Oh wow.
about 5% to about 1.2%. So they are super squeezed on margins. Imagine a company losing
Right.
75% of its income.
Wow.
And now the
And
biggest,
is this primarily because
yeah,
of COVID or some other reasons?
amazing questions. Not even. Um, Even now after COVID, you have like three
Mm-hmm.
drivers of this. Number one is food cost. Food cost went
Mm.
up nearly 20%. Number two is
Mm.
labor cost. Labor cost
Mm.
equally went up 15 to 20%. And number three is energy, which went up as well. Now, if you
Okay.
combine those three, they have a huge impact on the bottom line of restaurants.
Wow.
What you can do and what we say, energy is actually the third largest controllable
Mm-hmm.
expense, and we can control and help you with it. So that can give you a
Mm.
point, 2 percentage points back on, sorry, 2 percentage points back on your pre-tax income, which is
Yeah.
massive. It can double what you have right
Huge.
now. Then on
Mm.
the labor cost of labor, so that you don't have to go around or even hire someone to go around and measure
Mm.
the temperature, because we are in your freezer, in your fridge, super
Mm-hmm.
fast to deploy, super easy to deploy. So we help with your second largest controllable expense as well. In a way,
Mm.
um, we can in some cases like double or triple
Mm-hmm.
your pre-tax income
Mm-hmm.
that has been squeezed that much.
Got it. Got it. So, I mean, one of the mantras of YC is doing things that don't scale. So, how did you then, go about finding this kind of customers? Did you have anything Did you do anything interesting that our entrepreneurs can learn from in terms of how you approach going to market? Anything that didn't scale or anything that can scale? Especially if you want to share any secrets of the business.
Yes, that is a really secret of the business. That's a really good question. On go to market, that is a science in itself. I think what's really important in the beginning is listen to your customers. Be lean and listen. Like lean means you have some runway, so don't
Mhm,
spend much money on things, and listen. Like what are the real pain points? What are
mhm,
the real issues? And then try to price these pain points in. Like, okay, somebody might have a huge pain point, but
mhm,
it's not worth more than, I don't know, $1 per month. So is that really going to make you rich? Questionable. Like understand pain points of customers and then understand what is the value of that pain point. It's naturally quite difficult to get that. I think the number one recommendation I can give to anyone
mhm,
starting this process
mhm.
is talk to customers, and after talk to customers, and after just talk to customers. And it's a really difficult recommendation because sometimes you don't even really know who your
Hmm,
customers are. You
of course.
don't even know what questions to ask. Why would they talk to you? There's a number of ways you can. Hey, can I invite you for coffee? Can I give you like a $10 Amazon
Hmm,
um, um, Amazon card for talking to me?
hmm,
You can ask your friends and networks whether they have people, uh, in your in their network that you can talk
hmm,
to. But if there's one thing I can recommend
hmm,
as a not so secret in the industry, it's like talk to your customers and understand your customers really well, understand their pain point well, drill
hmm,
down on pain points, and then try to price them. Once you have a pain point that's not being served and that actually has a decent value to it to solve, you're
hmm,
golden. Then, quote unquote, all you have to do, which is also not that easy, but all you have to do is build a solution. But
hmm,
that comes before any building of solution. And we are
hmm,
also called, we are also, that has also been a challenge for us.
hmm.
It's much easier as an entrepreneur very often to actually start with a solution first and then look for a need. And
Of
that
course.
is putting the horse before the cart. Sorry, the
Uh,
cart before the
the
horse.
cart before
You
the
need
horse.
to start
Yeah.
with the customer need pain point first, and
Got it.
only after think about how can I solve that problem. Put the horse in
Got it.
front of the cart, not the cart in front of the horse.
Got it. Got it. And so, I mean, for you also, because especially since you're coming outside from outside US, initially you used, your McKinsey network or your personal network in US, or like how did you go about it? How did you find the people to talk to?
Yeah, that is a really great question. I was very lucky that in the US, people, I got into Antler US and they introduced
Hmm.
me to a number of people in the US. I got into YC in the US and they introduced me to a number of people in the US.
Okay.
So I was lucky because I could kind of jumpstart my network
Got
via
it.
the likes of YC and Antler.
Hmm.
For sure, if you don't know anyone, like think about ways you could actually find people in the US. Like, is there a blog on climate because you want to do something in climate? Is
Hmm.
there a community on like, I don't know, whatever you want to do, a community
Hmm.
on, hey, labor cost increase? Is there maybe a newsletter
Hmm.
on whatever it may be you want to do on AI, or like a Slack channel you can subscribe to, or
Got
a
it.
Reddit?
Hmm.
There's a number of ways you can go after that. Just be
Got it.
creative, and I'm very sure you find your
Got it.
axis.
Got it. And since you mentioned about pain points, so related to people, now that you have a decent sized team, even at this scale, like what is on top of your mind in terms of pain? Is it recruitment? Is it engaging them? Is it retaining them? Is it something
I
else? Is it employer branding? Anything you'd like to share?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I think our connection cut for a moment.
I was asking, in terms of your own people, what are some of the key pain points that you face at this stage? Of course, you have a wonderful team, as you mentioned. You've reached about a couple of dozen people. So, is it
Yeah,
recruiting even more people? Is it retaining the current people? Is it engaging them? Is it something else? If you can share something about that.
yeah. Right now we are in recruiting mode, and we want
Hmm.
to add a number of really strong people to our team. Those are still core people.
Mm-hmm.
Product manager, we are hiring an account executive.
Mm-hmm.
So these are like extremely defining for our culture still.
Mm-hmm.
And we are very doing a very thorough job in research to get very strong talent.
Mm-hmm.
And we have had some interviews that I felt were really great. So we have a lot of talent in that pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
That's recruiting is definitely currently our main pain point, but
Mm-hmm.
something which seems to be very solvable.
Mm-hmm. Understood. So, I mean, related to people, it's like a well-oiled machine right now, and you're continuing to grow, and people, because of your mission, which is so interesting, you don't have that much of a difficulty in attracting the right people to join your company. Is that a fair thing to say?
I think it's a fair thing to say. And if you
Mm-hmm.
think about it, that makes a ton of sense. Like
Mm-hmm.
if you look at restaurants, hotels, and so on, a restaurant
Mm-hmm.
has 7 to 10x the energy usage and hence the carbon emissions
Mm-hmm.
compared to the average commercial real estate. So like
Wow.
per square foot, I use 10x more energy and carbon emissions than like
Mm-hmm.
the average commercial real estate.
Mm-hmm.
If I take, let's say, if I go after a normal consumer in their apartment and I
Mm-hmm.
save 6%, that's great. If I
Mm-hmm.
go after a restaurant and I save them 10, 15, 20% on their energy cost,
Wow.
that equals in terms of carbon emissions,
Mm-hmm.
that is the equivalent of taking, 10, 15 houses, apartments completely
Mm.
off the grid.
Wow.
It's just as if they had never existed. So if you scale to all
Mm.
restaurants in the world with PowerX,
Mm.
you can take entire cities off the grid in terms of their carbon emissions.
Wow.
So that impact is real and it's massive.
Mm-hmm.
Now factor in hotels, which have a
Mm-hmm.
similar energy usage. You can
Mm.
take maybe not entire country, or maybe small ones, the energy use of entire country off
Mm.
the grid in terms of commercial, in terms
Mm.
of carbon emissions. So
Wow.
that's a
Mm-hmm.
mission that resonates very strongly with
Mm.
people.
Sure. So I would think, I mean, as a takeaway for an audience member, that you first, obviously, as an entrepreneur, have to believe extremely strongly, as Manuel is, about your own mission. And secondly, once the mission is set, attract people who believe in that mission, because that becomes like a well-oiled machine, as you put it. Because unless the person, because money, whatever one can offer, another startup will gets funded can offer slightly more, but not
Yeah,
everyone can help you reach that ultimate goal in your life, which is to be bigger than yourself and to leave a lasting impression, so to say, or to leave something that stays beyond your own lifetime. So
yeah.
that is something that is super exciting. I think we are, thanks so much for your time, Manuel. We are almost at the end of the session. I mean, before we go, I would maybe, love to hear a little bit that, that is something that people may not know as much about. So if you can share some story that maybe, not too many people, even in your own company, would know about you, something interesting that you would, not often that, people hear from you, or something interesting that you would like to leave with.
Wow, this is like a really interesting question. I think the people in my company they know quite a bit about me, so I wouldn't know what kind of interesting story that would be. Um, maybe so I go a bit earlier in my life. I had a
Mhm,
quite interesting I had a quite interesting life overall.
mhm.
And a story I just because it never came up, I haven't told my colleagues before. I think is that when I was uh, just finishing high school, I
Mhm.
flew to Russia, St. Petersburg,
Ah, okay.
and then actually took the train from St. Petersburg to Moscow via all of Siberia and Mongolia to Beijing
Oh, wow.
to to work there as a teacher for autistic children. So
Ah,
that's quite a train ride of a couple of weeks, and
oh,
you
wow.
get to know very very interesting people.
Of course.
We got to know, smugglers that were smuggling things across the border between Russia
Mhm,
and Mongolia. We
Hmm.
got to know people from all walks of life. That was a really interesting trip. I also
Wow.
really enjoyed living in China and being a teacher of
Hmm.
autistic children there.
Wow.
And then also traveling nearly a year through China and
Okay.
Asia overall. I've also been
Uh-huh.
to India. I actually worked in India with the World
Which part?
Bank.
Ah, okay.
Um,
In Delhi or somewhere else?
Primarily Delhi, but we
Okay.
were we were traveling a lot as well. And I have
Okay.
to admit, I love India. I love
Ah.
the the richness
Hmm.
of not only culture but everything, the
Hmm.
colors, the tastes,
Hmm.
the the diversity.
Hmm.
It's a very rare, in a very good meaning of the word, a very rare place, Jen, to find so many so much diversity
Hmm.
and so many things in one place intermingled. So
Hmm.
yeah, India is a very special
Hmm.
country, a very special place in gem.
Sure. So do you have any people in India right now, since you work remotely, or as of now, like where are your people based typically right now?
Yeah, we did have development teams in India. Currently, we do
Okay.
not. We are pretty much moving most of our work to the US.
Okay.
Um, right now, the only outside work is workers that we have are actually in Eastern Europe.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I leave it there because there is currently a war going on.
Of course.
So I don't want to go into more details on
Yeah,
that.
that can be
But
another
yeah,
podcast.
that can be another podcast. Yes.
But just out of curiosity, like what made you decide to move your development team together? Is it that think people who are closer to each other, coordination is better, or something else? Just out of curiosity.
I think time zone is a big thing. People are closer to
Okay.
each other.
Hmm.
Also, it was just, the kind of people we were looking for.
Hmm.
India is very strong in software, somewhat strong in hardware, but when
Hmm.
you like look more into hardware and firmware, you need to test very locally. So we need to have a lab
Got it.
right where we are in New York. Just given the kind of work we
Hmm.
we need engineers
Of course.
for.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Thank you so much. I think it's been a pleasure. Any parting thoughts, Manuel?
Yeah, I really enjoyed talking to you.
Hmm.
As a fellow entrepreneur, I really wish you all the very best. I know
Sure.
how rewarding it can be at some points in time, how hard it can be at some points in time.
Hmm.
Entrepreneurship really challenges you and puts you out of your comfort zone in so many ways, from a mental health perspective, from a work-life balance perspective.
Sure.
So I really appreciate your work there, and I wish you all the very best in your own journey as an entrepreneur.
Thank you so much. Absolute pleasure. Wish you and the PowerX team all the best. Take care.
Thank you very much.